In my recent autism assessment and diagnosis, it was also flagged up that I might be ADHD as well. And they suggested getting an assessment for that. I have had that now. So in today's video, I want to talk about the assessment process and the diagnosis result. Hey folks, it's Finn. Welcome back, lovely people. Thank you so much for choosing to spend time with me again today. And if you're watching for the first time, a massive welcome. I'm Finn, and this is Captain Pip Digby, looking incredibly cute, curled up and fluffy. I make videos on my life as a late diagnosed autistic person who happens to also be transgender and have chronic illness, notably ME, CFS and POTS. And yes, so today is all about getting a recent assessment for ADHD. I only went for a autism assessment and they then said, it looks like you might be ADHD as well. Now it's a quick synopsis, right, what this video is going to be about. So this video is going to be about the referral process, because I went through right to choose, the same as I did with my autism diagnosis. So I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about the assessment process itself and the diagnosis result. I'm 51. I have suspected all of my life that there is some kind of neurodivergence in me. Initially, I thought it was ADHD. I've always been incredibly hyper. My mind's always been on the go. I've always been really like 10 to the dozen, had nicknames like the Pocket Rocket, Tate and Lyle, the sugar packet. Just had real difficulty like staying in the moment, difficulty like at school with completing things. He was always commenting that I was so capable and yet couldn't stick to anything. And only if I could stick to things, I'd be really successful. You know, I've always had this issue. So if anything, I would have said ADHD. But then I never really did anything about it. And as I got older and my mental health problems got worse, I started to relate a lot more to autistic traits. And a lot of what I'd initially suspected was ADHD seemed to very much calm down. And the more my autistic traits have become more prominent, I've actually thought that a lot of the real hyperness that I've presented with has been my masking. That I'm very much like, hi, how are you, blah, 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 very bubbly as a way to mask. Now, I've not been doing that so much since I've become chronically unwell because I haven't got the energy. So yeah, over the last few years, I've kind of gone, okay, maybe it is more autism. And so that's why I went for an autism assessment, because it was autism that was more flagged up. It was the autistic traits, autistic characteristics that was the more problematic in my life. So that's why I went for the autism diagnosis, got diagnosed, all made sense. When I read in the report how I was observed and the things I noticed, I then kind of observed myself and thought, I have noticed these things myself, how I can be very erratic at times. I can talk 100 miles an hour. When I'm very interested in something, I can go on. People have commented on here so many times, especially since my diagnosis, about, we would have thought ADHD as well. Lots of you have said it. And how I can forget what I'm talking about. That's not just since the ME. I can literally like be on and on and on about something and then go, what was I talking about? And I've just done it now. What was I on about? Oh, squirrel, that kind of thing. So me and my counsellor, as you know, I've been working with the counsellor around unmasking for this last year, and we've been talking a lot about AuDHD, when you have both, when you have autism and ADHD, and how these two present. And I can see a lot of areas where autism alone doesn't explain some of the issues I'm having. And one of the big ones that comes up for me is like how I love to plan, but then I often struggle to put that plan into place, you know? So it was valid. So I decided, yeah, I would be going forward for an assessment. Now, I did exactly the same thing that I did for my autism assessment. I went through Right to Choose, but I just went with a different care provider because Skylight Psychiatry didn't provide ADHD assessments at the time, they do now. So I went with Care ADHD this time. Now, I won't rehash the whole process because it is exactly the same as with autism, an autistic assessment. So I will link you to a video. I never know which side, I always do this, as to what you do to go through Right to Choose. The only difference with Right to Choose when it comes to ADHD is that you have to think about shared care because anyone can go through Right to Choose. Your doctor cannot argue that it's a legal right to go through Right to Choose. What can be argued is whether a GP, a doctor, your GP agrees to shared care. Some GPs do, some GPs don't. Now with autism, this doesn't matter because there is no medication for autism. So shared care doesn't matter because there's no medication prescribed. But shared care with ADHD matters because if you are diagnosed and you want to explore medication, there is prescribing happening. And normally you would be diagnosed, that would be given to your doctor. Your doctor would then be advised what your medications are being prescribed and they would prescribe your medications. If they refuse shared care, you'll then have to pay privately for any medications you're prescribed for your ADHD. However, what is happening now is a number of providers through shared care, through Right to Choose, are taking up medications for you on NHS prices. It sounds really confusing, doesn't it? It took me ages to get my head around this. So what you have to do, if you're going through Right to Choose for an ADHD assessment, make sure that whatever provider you choose will also pick up your prescription costs should your GP not do shared care. And if you go on the ADHD website, which I will link below, at the very bottom, if you scroll through, it will give you a list of the providers for ADHD assessments. It will give you the time frame for you to be seen. It'll also tell you which ones will pick up your NHS prescription costs and do NHS prescription costs and not private costs should your GP refuse to do shared care. Does that make sense? Because the last thing you want to do is get a diagnosis, be suggested to have medication and then have to pay private costs. So that's the only difference. You go through Right to Choose the same way, but just make sure you choose a provider that will be happy to take over your medication should your GP not do shared care. That's the only difference. So I'm with Care ADHD. My GP doesn't do shared care, but Care ADHD will take over my prescribing for me and take care of my medication if I go forward for medication. That seemed more complicated than I intended it to be. Right, let's talk about Care ADHD. They were fairly quick. It was supposed to be 4 to 6 weeks when I first got my referral sent through. It ended up being 12 weeks. That was partly because there was a bit of a mix up with my GP. But 12 weeks from referral to appointment isn't too bad. The intake process, horrific. Really straightforward, same as Skylight was for me really. I took everything to the GP forwarded it over, they just forgot to attach a couple of things which made it take a while. But then, I mean, there's just so many, many, many questionnaires. And when you're neurodivergent and you're given questionnaires, just awful. But you just have to take your time, take deep breaths and just do them. Give yourself little breaks and do them. Again, there was the informant questionnaire. And if you're like me and you don't have any immediate family that can do it, that anybody that knows you from birth, they're happy to take a friend, a partner, anybody else who can do that. And Chris did mine. And that all took me, I think I took just over a week to do it because I've got ME as well. And so anything like that that's cognitive heavy just takes me a while. So I took a week to get those back. And not long after I got those back, I got the appointment. And as I say, that timeline from first referral to getting those questionnaires and then getting the appointment was 3 months. Now, the actual assessment itself was online and it was just one assessment this time, so much more straightforward. And unlike my autism assessment, which was full of weirdness and frogs, this was much more simple. This was just like a counselling session with a bit of kind of medical history tied in. It was kind of interwoven with this. So we talked about why I thought I might be ADHD, what about my childhood made me think I was ADHD, could I go back through my childhood and think back to like some examples, what was going on in my life now that was making things difficult, could I remember like stuff in my family. It was all sorts. It was really, really in depth. It was just over an hour. Just really, really thorough. Everything about my life from childhood, school, relationships, how I manage, everything, really, absolutely everything. It was really, really exhausting, but she was really friendly and approachable and kind and just really, really easy to talk to. She made it very, very easy to open up. And I very much went off on tangents a lot of the time. There was a couple of times where I went, what was the actual question? She went, that's fine, you've answered it. So I think that was kind of the point a lot of the time. And what really surprised me is at the end of it, she told me the diagnosis there and then, which I'd heard happens to some people. And I was kind of hoping, but it kind of threw me as well. So I can tell you that you meet the criteria for ADHD and you are the mostly inattentive type. You clearly meet that criteria. You don't quite meet the criteria for hyperactive ADHD, which makes sense to me. And she asked me how I felt, and I was quite thrown because although by this point I kind of thought that I probably was because of how me and my counsellor have been talking, I hadn't really prepared to be told, and I hadn't really prepared to be told a type either. So this threw me as well. And she was really lovely and asked how it felt, and then was asking about what I would expect next. And I think at this point I just kind of fogged off a bit. But she said, look, if you need to ask anything, want anything cleared up, please do email me, and then explain next steps, which I also fogged off at. But then it was less than 7 days later and I received an incredibly thorough, I mean, the most thorough email I've ever received. I mean, they must understand, mustn't they, what it comes to with ADHD and needing clear steps, because this was the most clear email I've ever read about, here is your report, here is what to do if there's anything in it you don't agree with that needs rewording, here is what to do now that you have a diagnosis about whether you like medication and what to do if you do want medication. It was amazing. So I've now clicked that yes, I would like to explore medication. Did I say meditation or medication? Medication. And they then detailed how long this will be. It's about 3 months, the process of talking through medication and titration and trying different medications. The report itself is incredibly detailed, and it's really interesting for me to read it and look at all the different things she's pointed out that do absolutely make sense to me and that do absolutely pick up on where autism alone doesn't explain certain things I struggle with, and where I can see how being AuDHD, autistic and ADHD, explains things better for me. And I probably want to like expand on this in other videos, because there's one area when it comes to socializing especially that I can see that AuDHD is really at play and makes things difficult for me. But this is still taking some time to figure it out, and I am going to be making some more videos on this as I work this out. Medication is still very much a question mark for me, but I've started that process so that I can talk it through and research and work it out. There's a lot of question marks because I have chronic illness, because I've heard that it doesn't work as well if you are AuDHD. So that's something I want to explore. So I will also be making update videos about that process as we go forward as well. But I just wanted to check in for now to say that I've had this diagnosis, and that for me, it just feels like a really important next part of the puzzle has been added for me to understand what's going on. And it's really interesting. It feels really interesting to have the right pieces at last to make sense of things going forwards. Yeah. Diagnoses are powerful things when they're the right ones that mean we can finally understand ourselves and put the right tools and support and understanding for ourselves in place. Especially after we spent a lifetime beating ourselves up when we've had a misunderstanding about ourselves from having a wrong diagnosis. So yeah, it feels good on that aspect. But yes, plenty more videos to come as I make sense of this and progress on this journey. So yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. If you have any comments, if you have any wisdom to share, as always, please do leave a comment in the section below. You know that I'm always very appreciative, it's difficult to say, of all of your comments, even when it does take me ages to reply, but thank you. And for those of you following along, this little furry bundle behind is doing very well. He's now, is he 12 days post-op from his surgery to remove the plate in his ankle? He's healed fine. His wound is perfect. He heals so well. We're just now waiting for some physiotherapy for him. He's going to have hydrotherapy because his little muscle in his leg is down to nothing at the moment. So we need some hydrotherapy for him, don't we, baby? Are you just, he's absolutely shattered today. Are you not even going to open your eyes and say hello? He says, no, I'm not. Right, big loves from us, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.